Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 213. Hatching. Part 4. Yu Jonghyuk's wrinkles deepened as he stared at the symbolic figure shaped like a doll. How are you sending an indirect message without a channel? The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire says it is possible if the symbolic body is in contact with the incarnation. Uriel's symbolic body was the doll on Yu Jonghyuk's shoulder. Yu Jonghyuk gently poked the symbolic figure with a finger. Is it okay to do this? The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire says it will be okay as long as it isn't caught by a dakibi. No, I'm not talking about the dakibi. Uriel initially didn't understand what he was saying. Yu Jonghyuk pointed to the side of the doll. The doll cocked her head and then covered her mouth with both eyes. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire is deeply moved by the heart of the incarnation Yu Jonghyuk. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire says it is a bit painful. There were weak sparks around Uriel's symbolic body. It was because the demon world was a taboo for her, an archangel. The demon world was the domain of the demon kings. Uriel was taking an unnatural risk and forced to bear the brunt of her probability being exhausted. Uriel moved to clinging to his arms, and Yu Jonghyuk asked her, "Why are you going so far to look for Kim Dokja?" The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire is asking if it isn't the same for you. There seems to be a misunderstanding. In fact, the demon world was originally a place where he would have never come. The difficulty here was incomparable to other scenarios of the same rank. It was comforting that this was the 73rd demon realm. There were no demon kings, and the ruler would be a duke at most. This much was worth a try. Above all, he was much stronger than he was at the same point in his previous regressions. I just don't like people impersonating me. It doesn't matter if it is Kim Dokja or not. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire is laughing. There are also many usable items in the demon world. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire is laughing loudly. Do it one more time and I will rip apart your body. Yu Jonghyuk turned his head and gazed at the wide horizon. Perhaps that bastard was somewhere in this desolate world. In this silent world, Yu Jonghyuk finally started moving. The Siswitz Industrial Complex. The atmosphere of the Duke's office was much more unusual than usual as Earl Salak sweated while reporting. Therefore, we plan to control access into and out of the industrial complex while the revolution is ongoing. Salak's heart sank several times as the face of the Jillabat envoy distorted in front of him. This person might be Jillabat's envoy, but he wasn't the one in charge of the delegation. Explosive Ambrose. He was a marquis of the Jillabat industrial complex and the most prominent candidate to be the next duke of the 73rd demon realm. Salak gasped for breath as he saw the fire glowing in Ambrose's eyes. He might have fled if it hadn't been for Duke Siswitz standing at the window and looking outside leisurely. That's why I am asking the Jillabat envoys to stay here for a while. Have you finished speaking? Why, yep. Then I will go. Salak hurriedly opened the office door and ran away. Meanwhile, Ambrose took a few deep breaths to control his temper. It was an annoying situation, but he couldn't act as usual. It was because the strongest existence in the 73rd demon world, Siswitz, was behind him. Duke Siswitz stared out the window for a while before smiling. That's what happened. What am I supposed to do? I'm sorry, but you can't leave. Please stay in the Siswitz industrial complex for the time being. In the end, Ambrose exploded. Don't you know these words can cause diplomatic issues? You're too sensitive. It is just a protection measure for the envoys of the Alliance. Is it because of the revolutionary? 7 executioners and 2 marquises have died. It has been a long time since this happened. The last phase of the revolutionary scenario would start when all executioners in the complex died. Strictly speaking, Duke Siswitz was in a crisis right now. Unlike his words, there was no sense of crisis in Duke Siswitz's expression. Ambrose didn't like this contradiction and complained, "A revolutionary appearing at this time, you must want to save face, Duke Siswitz." Really? I think it is fun. It has been 30 years since a revolutionary emerged in Siswitz. Sometimes this event is needed. You are speaking like the constellations. Why not? The story isn't only related to the constellations. Ambrose would have scoffed if a normal incarnation had said this. However, Duke Siswitz was qualified to say such things. He wasn't comparable to the great constellations, but Siswitz was a monster who had ruled the 73rd demon realm for 400 years. It is good to have as many stories as possible before the beginning of the Demon King competition. The more powerful the revolutionary that appeared, the better it is for me. He never even thought about being hit by the revolution. Why are you so confident that you can stop the revolution? Ambrose asked. Why do you think? Ambrose's eyes sank at the question. Maybe it was an obvious story. Siswitz had lost 2 marquises in this incident. I hope you won't betray Jillabat. Haha, who said that? I'm telling you this personally. I will also give you a piece of advice. Do you think that Duke Jillabat can become the Demon King? Ambrose was a bit upset by the words. Siswitz didn't give him time to think. Or do you think Meladin and Burken can become the new Demon King? I can't answer this question. No, you can answer it. It is because everyone knows who is the strongest of the 4 dukes in the 73rd demon realm. Ambrose gulped. This calm declaration could sound so scary. Once again, the oldest duke of the 73rd demon realm couldn't be ignored. It won't be easy. Meladin has joined hands with Vedas. He isn't the only one who can borrow the power of the constellations. These words. Duke Siswitz stared at the sky outside the window instead of answering. The Dakibis will come soon. Then what will happen next? Now the night sky was completely dark. However, soon there would be many stars in the night sky. Then the other demon kings would show up as a response to the emergence of the constellations. Marquis Ambrose felt a heart-shaking sensation. Finally, the 73rd demon realm would become a battleground for a proper scenario. Is there a channel liaison yet? I put in a request to the bureau. At this moment, Ambrose realized why Siswitz didn't look for support. Once the Dakibis appeared and the full-fledged scenarios began, the constellations would gather towards the bigger events. Suddenly, some thoughts ran through his head. It wouldn't be bad for there to be a small entertainment before the full-fledged Demon King competition begins. The constellations love slaughter. Is that why you are leaving the revolution alone? Siswitz stared at the smoke with a strange smile. Ambrose sighed bitterly. You were born evil. Every conflict in this world was a commodity. Now Siswitz was selling the lives of the many civilians in the industrial complex to seek the attention of the constellations. Thank you for the compliment. Ambrose shook his head like he was tired. If he planned this production, then Duke Siswitz would surely be preparing for a greater blow. It wasn't difficult to predict what would happen in the industrial complex. I can see movement in the factory. The most powerful story weapon possessed by the Dukes, the factory. Duke Siswitz nodded. I have already prepared it, so you will see sooner or later. Anticipation filled Ambrose's eyes. The most powerful person in the 73rd demon realm. It wasn't a common opportunity to see him in action. Then, the hashtag BI90594 channel has been created in the Siswitz Industrial Complex area. Ambrose heard the message and stood up with amazement. Did you call the Dakibis already? Once he saw the expression on Duke Siswitz's face, Ambrose realized this wasn't part of the plan. The door of the office opened and somebody ran in. Duke. I'm sorry, but I have an urgent report. It was Earl Salak, who previously fled from this place. Siswitz quickly managed his facial expression and replied, Tell me. His report was probably related to the emergence of the new channel. However, unexpected words emerged from Salak's mouth. The factory isn't operating hard enough. Duke Siswitz made an embarrassed expression. What does that mean? Didn't I tell you to replenish it? That, it looks like all the civilians who came to work have stolen the story fragments. Ambrose noticed how things were progressing and said, "It seems this revolutionary is using his head. Perhaps the Dakibis moved first, because of him." "That is impossible. The negotiations with the Bureau haven't ended yet." Duke Siswitz frowned at the unexpected situation and immediately gave instructions. "Send the supervisors and slaves to the horizon. Have them collect more story fragments." "I have already sent them. By the way." Duke Siswitz hadn't realized that the report wasn't over. Ursulok's shoulders hunched over like he was afraid of how the Duke would react. I lost contact with the supervisor who went out to collect the story fragments. The horizon near the Siswitz industrial complex." Jang Haeun kicked the body of the dead supervisor and said, "It seems that the Duke has been preparing for quite a while. Ordering a collection of this scale." It was an extra-large collection with thousands of slaves mobilized. The situation was resolved, but it would have been dangerous if we had been a bit later. It was impossible to launch a full-scale war against the factory when my incarnation body wasn't yet intact. Things would have become worse if these story fragments entered the factory. "You are good." I glanced at Han Myungo, beside me. He knew the Duke would move in this way. If Han Myungo hadn't been the spy, I wouldn't have guessed the exact timing to put the plan into action. Han Myungo was elated by my praise and laughed. Who am I? Aren't I the brain of Minosoft? You can use that as a modifier if you ever become a constellation." I smiled at Han Myungo. At first, I didn't like being on the same side as this person. Now I thought it wasn't a bad choice. "Bring the slaves over here. I will start repairing those who are still sane first." Now that I had decided to wage war properly, I could feel something different from Aileen and the citizens. I watched them and controlled my heart. The baby Dakibi, who looked like cotton candy, sat on my shoulder and cried out. "Bot." Her memories hadn't been recovered, but every Dakibi had the instincts of a streamer. They filled in the scenarios where there should be a story. A new sub-scenario has arrived. The sub-scenario, "Liberate the Slaves," has started. "Thank you." I lightly stroked her head and Bayu shouted, "It might not be possible for me to enter the main scenario, but I could receive a sub-scenario whenever there was an opportunity. It might be a temporary measure, but if I kept building up sub-scenarios, I would be able to recover enough to face the Duke." Kim Dokja thought, "There is nothing urgent. Time is still on my side. I now need to thoroughly prepare to safely pass the Demon World scenario." I sincerely thought this. At least, until I heard an unexpected message. A new constellation has entered the hashtag BI90594 channel. Chapter 214. Hatching. Part 5. A new constellation? Already? It was earlier than the expected timing. I thought there would only be subscriptions after a few more incidents. A constellation is looking at the incarnations without revealing their modifier. It didn't seem to be a constellation I had already met. I was a bit disappointed. I was hoping it would be Secretive Plotter or Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. Did you hear the message just now? What message? I heard an indirect message. I didn't know if it was rich or not, but the new constellation was sprinkling indirect messages from the beginning. Bayu shouted from her position on my body. Maybe Bayu was receiving many coins right now. It was natural to be amazed. Now she knew how to make coins as a Dakibi. Kim Dokja thought, "I hope they are a good person." The inclination of the initial subscribers would determine the nature of the channel. The stimulus and difficulty of the scenario would be determined if the initial constellations were incarnation seekers or fun seekers. After all, every detail that the Dakibis couldn't determine were made in response to the desires of the subscribers. In fact, this was what I was most worried about. The 41st regression, Shin Yusung had already suffered countless injuries from the Dakibis. In order to continue the scenario in the future, Bayu must constantly face the desires of the constellations. Bot? I placed my hand on Bayu's head. A constellation who hasn't revealed their modifier is revealing their modifier. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss disapproves of the incarnations here. I frowned at the message. This was a bad start. I remembered hearing about the Nouveau Richer Snake Boss and ways of survival. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is bored with the development of the scenario. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is dissatisfied with the naive development of the Dakibi. Nouveau Richer Snake Boss. His hobby was to enter the channels containing weak constellations, flash coins around and ruin the scenario. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss wants stimulation. I remembered ways of survival talking about how many channels had decreased subscribers or were completely destroyed due to him. He was only mentioned in passing, but now I had to face him directly. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss doesn't want the survival of the removal slaves. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss says everyone should cooperate to kill the enemies. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss declares that he will donate coins to anyone who kills a removal slave. The citizens started to look around at the messages. Some people looked confused at what this meant and others looked hesitant. Some people were panic-stricken as bad memories popped up. However, some of them were secretly taking out their weapons. Zhang Han noticed it and screamed, "Wait! What are you doing right now?" He was one step late. Once they saw one person taking out a weapon, the actions of the citizens became faster. 1, 2, 3. The number of weapons increased. Hey, are you serious? This isn't it. Mark seized a citizen who was approaching a removal slave. Just because they are removal slaves doesn't mean they are lost. Some still have their minds. Most of them were those who sold their souls to their duke. Not all of them are like that. Don't you know? Aren't they dead anyway? This is great. The citizens were blinded by coins and drew their blades. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is excited about the intensified conflict. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss declares that he will donate 3,000 coins to the incarnation who kills the most removal slaves. 3,000 coins. It was a luxurious sum in the industrial complex where coins were precious. Let's just kill them. We have to live. Right. Chairman, just kill everyone and go back. The balance of voices was leaning sharply. The number of citizens who took out weapons increased. Mark once again shouted to stop their greed. They were once citizens. If you act this way, how are you different from the nobles? Get out of the way. If we don't act right now. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is enjoying the dispute between citizens. The moment Mark was pushed to his ass by the struggle, another message followed. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss declares that he will donate 300 coins to an incarnation who kills a citizen. The citizens were momentarily stunned. They glanced at each other and hurriedly moved away from each other. Wait a minute. I thought I knew what they were thinking. Yes, the scenario was originally like this. One day, the citizens of this place had performed the first scenario. Pointing blades at each other and killing to survive. The citizens glanced at each other while holding weapons. A constellation spoke a few words, and the bonds of the citizens gathered in the name of revolution were gradually dimming. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is delighted with the reaction from the incarnations. My hatred of the constellations, which I had forgotten for a while, revived again. Once upon a time, I might have been like these citizens. I would have played along with what the constellations for 1 or 2 coins, adapted to the story of the constellations and become disillusioned, saying this is unavoidable. Kim Dokja thought. It was unavoidable. There is nothing unavoidable. I took a step back and completely crushed the floor. I used this force to jump into the crowd of citizens. Then I grabbed the neck of the citizen who had strongly pushed Mark. Kekiak. 300 coins per body. Quook. Our revolutionary? 300 coins. Don't you think that is too cheap? The citizen I was holding struggled, but I tightened my grip instead of releasing my hand. Soon after, the pale citizen dropped his weapon and the surrounding citizens screamed. Once the citizen was about to suffocate, I laid him down roughly on the ground. Their terrified eyes watched me. 300 coins per person, how much would it be if I kill everyone here? If you kill the removal slaves, he will give 3,000 coins. So altogether, it is 13,000 coins, indeed, it is hard to ignore. 13,000 coins. Most of the citizens here had never seen such an amount. But don't you know? You can't change anything with 13,000 coins. At best, it will be a few vague skills and some equipment. The citizens' eyes started shaking. Those who had never used the Dakibi bag wouldn't know. 13,000 coins were just a petty amount of cash for the high-ranking constellations. What could they do in this world with that much money? I looked down at the citizen on the ground. Then what are you going to do next? Why yes? What will you do with the 13,000 coins after killing everyone? Emotion slowly crossed the faces of the citizens. Fear and... The citizens murmured in voices that sounded like they had fallen into an abyss. And nothing. I watched the bewildered faces of the citizens. In fact, I knew. They didn't do this with a clear purpose. Perhaps the citizens themselves didn't understand why they were trying to gather coins. They just had the compulsion to survive and collect more coins than other incarnations. The scenarios made the incarnations slaves to the story. In this heavy silence, the citizens realized what they had been planning to do and burst out crying. Our revolutionary. I got up, ignoring their eyes. Then I spoke casually, since a channel has opened, more constellations will come in the future. The eyes of the citizens staring at me were shaking with a different light. Don't sell your stories for just 1 or 2 coins. If you want to sell them, do it for the right value. I didn't know how much of my words had been communicated to the people. I wasn't good at talking. Even so, this was all I could do. The people around me bit their lips with sad faces. Then they looked like they had decided to do something. The citizens dropped their heads and started to put away their weapons. None of them opened their mouths, but their expressions alone were an answer. However, not all of them accepted my words. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is staring at you. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss feels a strong rage towards you. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss has requested a bounty scenario. A bounty scenario. Yes, there was something like that. It was a damn scenario that was invoked at the request of the constellations. Revolutionary? The surprised citizens glanced at me with fearful faces. The target was obvious if a bounty scenario was triggered now. At this time, Bayu rose from my head and floated in the air. Bought. Other Dakibis would have willingly accepted the bounty scenario, but Bayu couldn't do that. Bayu's body swelled up as if to refuse the request. Bought? Then faint sparks flowed over Bayu's small body. Be bought. Bat it. At this moment, I realized what would happen. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss has requested a bounty scenario. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss has requested a bounty scenario. Bayu was now struggling with her instincts. Unlike common misunderstandings, the Dakibis don't deliberately produce stimulating scenes. It was out of instinct to meet the demands of a constellation subscribed to a channel. The more innate the streamer, the more powerful these instincts are. It is an instinct to create a scenario that more beings desire. All Dakibi live with such instincts. Bayu was still a baby, and it was more difficult for her to overcome such instincts. I reached out and lightly grabbed Bayu. It's okay. There isn't only one subscriber to this channel. The constellation Demon King of Salvation doesn't agree with the invocation of the bounty scenario. The spark scattered instantly at my fingertips. The bounty scenario request has been denied. The constellation Nouveau Richer Snake Boss is astonished. I raised my head towards the air. Snake Boss. The story that you want isn't here. I gazed at the faint constellations shining in the night sky and declared in a nonchalant voice. I'm busy, so get lost.